I've never liked gas stations at night, even when I was just passing through. Filling up my tank on a lonely highway, I hated the way the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and cast long shadows across the cracked concrete. The way the desert wind seemed to fall silent the moment you stepped under that buzzing canopy. The way you felt completely alone, even if there was a cashier behind the counter. But this time, I wasn't just passing through. This time, I was the one behind the counter. The job posting had been vague. Overnight clerk needed. Remote location. Room and board included. That should have been enough to scare me off, but I didn't have much of a choice. I'd lost my previous job, my landlord was getting impatient, and my car was threatening to die for good. I didn't have a family to fall back on, and none of my friends had space on their couches. So when the owner of the station, a man named Earl, called me back after only one day, I felt like I had no right to be picky. When I first arrived, I thought I'd driven past the place. The station was tucked just off Route 190, down a gravel road barely wide enough for a car. The sign out front was half-lit, buzzing, with faded letters that once must have read Earl's Gas and Goods, though now it just looked like gas and goo. One single pump, a store the size of a cheap diner, and nothing else for miles but desert scrub and the black outline of mountains in the distance. Earl met me at the door. He was in his 50s, maybe 60s, with a potbelly pushing against his plaid shirt and yellow teeth that showed whenever he smiled. His handshake was limp and damp, and when he spoke his voice sounded like gravel poured down a chute. "You're the kid who answered the ad?" he asked. I told him yes. "You'll do. Job's easy. Stock shelves, ring up customers, clean up. You'll have long stretches where nothing happens. Bring a book or something." He paused. His eyes drifted toward the floor, toward a square of wood with a padlock in the middle, right behind the counter. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Only rule is don't go in the basement." I thought he was joking, and I almost laughed, but his face didn't change. His eyes were cold, flat, like he'd said something deadly serious. "You got it." I nodded, suddenly uncomfortable. That first night, I sat behind the counter, tapping at my phone, waiting for the minutes to crawl past. Only a handful of customers came through. A weary trucker who didn't say a word, a young couple who bickered the entire time they picked through the snack aisle, and a man in a suit who bought a lighter and left without meeting my eyes. By 1 in the morning, the place was empty, silent, except for the buzz of the lights overhead and the faint tick of the wall clock. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. That's when I heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. At first, I thought it was a rat, but the sound was coming from directly behind me, from beneath the floor. I turned in my seat, staring at the trapdoor. The padlock was in place, but the wood shuddered slightly, as if something beneath it was pressing upward. My heart pounded. I told myself it was just the wind, just the building settling. But the scratching kept coming, slow, deliberate, like nails on concrete. I forced myself to ignore it, turning up the little radio on the counter, drowning the sound in static and old country songs. By the time Earl arrived in the morning, I convinced myself it hadn't happened at all. But the second night, it did, and this time it wasn't scratching. It was breathing, long, ragged, inhuman breaths, rising from the trapdoor, filling the silence of the store. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. The sound was wet, rattling, as if lungs filled with water were straining to keep alive. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed, staring at that trapdoor. I must have dozed off eventually, because when I woke, the sun was coming through the glass door and Earl was standing over me. "You hear it, didn't you?" he asked. I blinked up at him, confused. "Hear what?" "The basement," he said. I shook my head, but he just smiled, his yellow teeth gleaming. He didn't believe me. On the third night, something happened that made lying impossible. It was past 2 in the morning. I was staring at the security cameras, trying to stay awake, when I noticed something outside. A figure, standing by the pumps, tall, still. The grainy feed made it impossible to see details, but I could tell one thing. They weren't moving. They weren't getting gas. They were just staring at the building. 5 minutes passed. 10. They didn't move an inch. Finally, I worked up the nerve to go outside. The desert air was icy, sharp against my skin. I walked toward the pumps, squinting into the darkness. But the figure was gone. The pump stood empty, the gravel lot stretching out into nothing. No sound, no car, no footprints. And when I turned back to the store, I froze. The trapdoor was open, only a few inches, but enough to see blackness yawning below. Enough to smell damp, rotting earth drifting up through the crack. I slammed it shut, locked it, shoved a chair on top, and sat there with my heart hammering until dawn. When Earl came in, I demanded answers. What's down there? What the hell is in the basement? He just chewed on his toothpick and shook his head. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. You'll sleep better if you don't know. But I didn't sleep better. Not at all. I couldn't shake it after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that sliver of black beneath the trapdoor, smelled the rot seeping up from below. I told myself I wouldn't let curiosity win, but curiosity is a disease. It eats at you slowly until resistance feels worse than giving in. By the end of the week, I was twitchy, restless, waiting for the sound to start. And of course, it did. Only this time, it wasn't scratching. It wasn't breathing. It was whispering. I was restocking shelves when I first heard it. My name, faint like wind through a crack. I froze, turned, stared at the trapdoor. Nothing moved, but then it came again. Whispered, soft but unmistakable. Tom. My blood went cold. Earl had never called me by name. Hell, he'd barely spoken to me beyond grunts and warnings. I swallowed hard and told myself it wasn't real. But when I walked back behind the counter, I saw the padlock had shifted. It wasn't hanging down anymore. It was lying on the floor. I'd locked it. I knew I'd locked it. For an hour I sat there, chair pressed against the wood, hands trembling, waiting for something to burst through. Nothing did. By the time Earl arrived in the morning, I was pale and shaking. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You opened it, didn't you?" "No." I croaked. "No, I swear." "Doesn't matter," he said. He didn't sound angry, didn't even sound surprised, just tired. "It knows you now." I asked him what that meant, but he walked away, jingling his keys, like he hadn't heard me at all. The next few nights blurred together. I kept hearing it. Sometimes whispers, sometimes slow, dragging footsteps from below. Once, around 3 a.m., the power went out. Every light in the station flickered off at once. I sat in the dark, barely breathing, listening to something move beneath me. The trapdoor creaked. I gripped the flashlight so hard my fingers went numb, ready to swing it at whatever came up. But the light snapped back on, and the trapdoor was shut. On my 7th night, something changed. It was quiet, too quiet. Not a scratch, not a whisper. Just silence that stretched on until it made my skin crawl. I stared at the monitors, but the screens fuzzed with static. I banged them with my palm. The static cleared for a moment, and what I saw nearly made me scream. The cameras weren't showing the gas station anymore. They were showing below, the basement. The picture was grainy, but I could make out stone walls slick with moisture. The floor was littered with something pale. Bones, I thought. Bones scattered like trash. And in the far corner, something hunched, still as a statue. I leaned closer, squinting, and then it moved. Just a twitch, but enough to catch the light. Its face was wrong. Stretched too thin, eyes too wide, mouth filled with jagged rows of teeth. The feed cut back to static. That was the first time I truly thought about leaving. I could have packed up, driven off, pretended the job had never happened. But the money Earl promised was decent, and I didn't have anywhere else to go. More than that, though, I needed to know. So on my 9th night, I broke the rule. I waited until after 2, when the desert outside was black and still. My hands shook as I unlocked the trapdoor. The hinges groaned, loud in the silence, and the stench hit me. Rot, damp earth, coppery like old blood. I gagged but forced myself down the stairs, flashlight trembling in my grip. The air grew colder with every step. My breath fogged in front of me. At the bottom, the concrete gave way to packed dirt. The walls looked rough, uneven, but when I touched them, I recoiled. They weren't stone. They were wood. Old, splintered boards, stained dark. I shone the light across them, and my stomach lurched. Carvings. Dozens, hundreds of carvings etched into the wood. Symbols I didn't recognize. And words. Names. One of them was mine. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The beam darted across the floor, catching on something pale. Teeth, not animal bones. Teeth scattered in little piles, as if someone had been collecting them. The whisper came again, clearer this time, louder. Tom. I spun the light toward the far end of the basement, and there it was, the figure from the cameras. Its skin was paper white, stretched tight across bones, its eyes bulging, its mouth wide, impossibly wide. It crouched in the corner like a spider, teeth glinting as it grinned, and then it spoke in a voice that rattled in my skull. "You're late." That was all it said, but it was enough. I bolted, ran up the stairs, slammed the trapdoor, locked it, shoved the chair on top. My heart felt like it would explode. The whispers followed me, fading only as dawn broke. When Earl arrived, I told him I quit. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care if I had to sleep in my car. He just smiled, his yellow teeth flashing. "Doesn't matter," he said. "Once you've been down there, you don't really leave." I drove away and didn't look back. But last night, as I brushed my teeth, I noticed something. One of them was loose, wiggling, like it didn't belong to me anymore. And in the mirror, just for a moment, I thought I saw someone else's grin staring back. Story 2. I wasn't supposed to be there. That's what I keep telling myself whenever the memories come back late at night. When I smell gasoline in my dreams or hear the faint hum of fluorescent lights, even in a dark room, I wasn't supposed to be there. The job fell into my lap after I answered a vague listing on a classified site. Overnight clerk, remote gas station, immediate start. I needed money badly, and I didn't ask questions. The man who hired me didn't ask many either. His name was Harold, and he sounded exhausted on the phone, like he was half drunk or hadn't slept in weeks. He told me to show up just before midnight. The station was out in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no motels, not even a glow of another building on the horizon. Just desert and a cracked road that seemed to stretch into infinity. The gas station squatted at the end of the drive like a bad dream, its flickering sign barely lighting the gravel lot. Harold was waiting at the door. He was older than I expected, maybe late 60s, with pale skin and watery eyes that never seemed to focus. He smelled faintly of whiskey and sweat. "You're here," he said flatly. "Good. You'll keep the place open. Restock the shelves if anyone comes by. It's easy work. Just stay behind the counter after 2. Don't go near the basement." The way he said it made my stomach twist. I asked what was in the basement. He looked at me like I was a fool. "Nothing you want to see." Then he left, his truck coughing into the darkness, and suddenly the silence pressed in from all sides. The first few hours were dull. One trucker stopped by for coffee. A dusty sedan pulled in, headlights broken, the driver buying cigarettes without saying a word. After that, nothing. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock. I sat on a stool behind the counter, tapping my fingers against the glass, trying to fight off sleep. That's when I heard it. The thud came from beneath my feet, low and hollow, like someone dropping a heavy box. I froze, staring at the trapdoor a few feet behind me. The padlock gleamed dully in the fluorescent light. Another thud, louder this time, then a scraping, like fingernails dragging across wood. I told myself it was rats, or plumbing, or the building settling. But my skin prickled, and my body didn't believe the lies I fed it. I turned the radio up to drown it out, blasting static-filled country music into the empty aisles. At 2:30, I heard footsteps, not from outside, but from below, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth beneath the trapdoor. The kind of footsteps that weren't looking for food, the kind that were waiting. By dawn, the sounds had stopped, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the trapdoor until Harold came back, his eyes bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled. "You heard it," he muttered, not asking but stating. I didn't answer. The second night was worse. It started earlier, just after midnight. Knocks. soft at first, then harder, rattling the wood. The padlock shook in place, and I swore I saw the wood bulge upward, as though something was pressing from below. I backed away, heart hammering, until I was against a glass door. For a moment, I thought about leaving, just walking out into the desert, never looking back. But where would I go? I didn't even have gas money. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then, from behind the trapdoor, a voice. It wasn't clear at first, just a low murmur, like someone whispering through a wall. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. "Help me." I nearly choked on my own breath. It was a woman's voice, faint, trembling, desperate. "Please," it said. "They left me down here. Don't let me die." Every instinct screamed at me to ignore it, but I couldn't. I edged toward the trapdoor, staring at the lock. The voice came again, more frantic now. "They'll be back soon. Please, before he finds out." I dropped to my knees, hands trembling as I reached for the lock. But just as I touched it, I hesitated. Something was wrong. The voice didn't echo the way it should have. It was too clear, too close, like the person wasn't below but right against the wood, mouth pressed to cracks. I whispered, "Who's down there?" Silence. Then, after a long pause, "I know your name." My stomach turned to ice. I stumbled back, knocking into a shelf, sending bags of chips crashing to the floor. The voice giggled. A soft, cruel sound. "You'll open it soon." They all do. I stayed as far from the counter as I could until the sun came up, hugging myself in the snack aisle, ears ringing with that laugh. When Harold arrived, I demanded to know the truth. "Who's in the basement?" I asked. "What's locked down there?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that suddenly seemed sober and sharp. Finally, he said, "It's not a who, it's a what. And if you're smart, you'll stop listening to it." Then he tossed me the keys and said, "Your turn tonight." That night I tried to prepare. I brought earbuds, blasted music, anything to drown out whatever was waiting in the dark beneath the floor. But at 1 a.m, the power flickered. The radio died. My phone screen went black. Silence. Then the voice returned. "Tom." It said my name again, the way it had before, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was clear, sharp, as if the speaker was standing right behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but the store was empty. The aisle stood silent, lit in a pale, buzzing glow. I staggered back toward the counter, eyes fixed on the trapdoor. The lock rattled, metal clinking against the wood. And then, slowly, impossibly, it began to lift. Just an inch, just enough for the smell to hit me. Damp, moldy copper sweet, like wet earth soaked with blood. I slammed the chair down on top of it, forcing it shut, my hands slick with sweat. From beneath, the voice screamed. It was no longer a woman's voice. It was deeper, warped, like 100 throats crying out in unison. The sound made my vision blur, made my ears ache. I pressed my palms against my head, teeth clenched, until it stopped. When dawn came, I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. Harold came in, whistling like nothing was wrong, and I finally snapped. "I quit," I said. My voice cracked. "You didn't tell me what this job really was. Whatever's down there, you deal with it yourself." He didn't argue, he just smiled a little. "I figured you'd say that." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a set of keys, and slid them across the counter. I frowned. "What's this?" "Your truck," he said. "Outback. Full tank. You earned it." I didn't ask how he knew I didn't have a car, or how he knew I was broke. I didn't care. I just wanted out. I grabbed the keys and left, not even bothering to look back at the station. The truck was old, dented, but it roared to life when I turned the ignition. I drove fast, gravel spitting beneath the tires, the desert road stretching endless before me. My chest loosened for the first time in days. But 20 minutes later, I realized something was wrong. The road wasn't changing. No matter how far I drove, I kept passing the same scrubby bushes, the same jagged rocks. The fuel gauge didn't budge. And in the rearview mirror, faint and small on the horizon, the gas station sign still flickered. I pressed harder on the gas. Sweat dripped down my back. But the station stayed there, always there, like I was driving in circles without turning the wheel. And then, faintly at first, I heard it, the voice. Not from beneath the floor this time, from the back seat. I didn't dare look, but I felt the air grow colder. I saw frost bloom on the edges of the window, and the voice leaned close to my ear, so close I could feel the wet heat of its breath. You should have stayed. I slammed the brakes, the truck fishtailing on gravel, skidding to a stop. My chest heaved. Slowly I turned. The back seat was empty, but on the cracked leather, carved deep into material, was a single word: down. I drove until morning, until the sky lit pale gold over the desert. And finally, after what felt like hours, the station was gone. The road stretched clean, endless. My chest loosened. I told myself I was free. That was weeks ago. I made it back to the city, got a job in a warehouse, tried to forget, but every night I hear it again, through the floor of my apartment, through the vents at work. Always the same word, whispered in that wet, broken voice: down. And last night, I found something waiting outside my door. A key, rusted, cold, with a tag still attached. It read basement. Story 3. I should have known something was off the second I saw the ad. No company name, no hourly rate, just a phone number and the words: overnight attendant needed. Must not be squeamish. I called anyway. The man who answered sounded calm, friendly even. He asked if I could start the next night. I said yes without thinking. That was my first mistake. The gas station was further out than I expected. The road dwindled to gravel, then to dirt, until finally the headlights caught on a squat building with a rusted sign that buzzed faintly in the dark. 2 pumps, both ancient. Their hoses cracked like dried skin. A man waited by the door. He looked ordinary enough, button-up shirt, neat hair. But when he smiled, I felt a chill crawl across my shoulders. His teeth were too perfect, like something from a magazine, but his eyes didn't smile at all. "You must be Ryan," he said. "I'm glad you're here." He shook my hand, his grip surprisingly firm, and led me inside. The place smelled faintly of bleach and gasoline. Shelves were lined with stale snacks and dusty cans of soda. Behind the counter was the usual setup: register, stool, small TV, and the trapdoor. It sat flush with the floorboards, a square of darker wood, a thick padlock bolted to the middle. I didn't ask about it. Not yet. "Your job simple," the man said. "Keep the place open. Ring up anyone who stops by. Don't open the basement." I must have frowned, because he leaned closer. That's the most important part. No matter what you hear, no matter what you see, you don't touch that lock. Understood? I nodded. He clapped me on the shoulder, still smiling, and left without another word. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. A beat-up pickup pulled in, bought a 6-pack, and left. An old man in a hat filled his tank and nodded at me through the glass. After that, silence. The kind that fills your ears, makes you feel like the world has ended just outside the reach of the lights. At 1:07 a.m., I heard it, knocking. Not frantic, not violent. Just 3 slow knocks, deliberate, from directly beneath the trapdoor. I froze. My mind scrambled for explanations, pipes, animals, anything. But deep down I knew it was someone down there, someone who knew exactly where I was. I forced myself to stay put, knuckles white around the edge of the counter. After a minute, the knocking stopped. I let out a shaky laugh, told myself I was being stupid, and went back to scrolling through my phone. Then the voices started. At first, it was just one, a man's voice, low and rough, seeping up to the cracks in the wood. "Please, just a minute. Just let me out." I stood, my knees weak, staring at the trapdoor. "I don't belong here," the voice said. "It's a mistake. I shouldn't be here." Something in the way it spoke, it wasn't begging. It was convincing, careful, like it knew exactly how to pull at me. I grabbed the remote and turned up the TV as loud as it would go, the sound of a canned laugh track rattling through the empty store. But even over the noise, I heard the voice. "I know you, Ryan. I know why you're here. I snapped the TV off. My skin prickled. How do you know my name? I whispered. Silence. Then softly, because you'll be next. I backed away, stumbling against a candy rack, nearly knocking it over. I wanted to run outside, leave right then, but when I looked through the glass door, my stomach dropped. There were people out there, at least a dozen of them, standing by the pumps, the edge of the gravel lot, their faces lost in shadow. They weren't moving, just standing, heads tilted slightly toward the building. My breath hitched. I looked up at the security monitor above the counter. The grainy feed showed the lot outside, empty. When I looked back through the glass, the figures were gone. I didn't sleep. I didn't move from the stool until the sky began to pale. The man returned at dawn, same calm smile plastered on his face. "How was your first night?" he asked. I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but all that came out was a horse. "What's in the basement?" He looked at me for a long time, then said, "Something that used to be human." And then, as if that explained everything, he walked out again, leaving me to wait for the next night. The second night, I almost didn't go back. My gut told me to drive past the turnoff, to keep going until the gas ran out, to never look back at that squat little station in the desert. But something stronger than fear dragged me there. Curiosity, greed, maybe something worse. The man was waiting at the door again, smiling like he'd been standing there the whole day. "You came back," he said. I didn't answer. "You last longer than the others." That made my stomach twist. I wanted to ask what he meant, but his eyes told me I didn't want the answer. He left me alone again, like the night before, and I took my place behind the counter. For an hour, nothing happened. I almost let myself believe the first night had been my imagination. But at 12:46, the knocking started again. 3 slow, steady raps against the wood. Then silence. I tried to ignore it, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles ached. Then the voice came back. "Ryan," it said, low and smooth, like honey poured over glass. "You don't belong up there." I covered my ears. It didn't help. The words seeped in anyway, vibrating to the floor, through my bones. "Don't you want to know?" it asked. "Don't you want to see?" I wanted to scream no. But another part of me, the part that couldn't stop thinking about the man's too perfect smile and the figures outside, whispered yes. The padlock rattled, metal scraping against wood. Slowly, the trapdoor rose a fraction of an inch before slamming shut again, as if something was testing the strength of the lock. And then I heard something worse than the voice. Breathing. Not one person. Dozens. Gasping, ragged. Too fast. Too close, right below my feet. I leapt off the stool, heart pounding. "Shut up!" I screamed at the floor. "Shut the hell up!" Everything went silent. For a moment, I thought I'd won. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I spun. The aisle was empty, but on the security monitor, I saw movement. Figures, tall and thin, crawling on all fours between the shelves. They weren't there when I looked with my own eyes, just on the screen. Their limbs bent wrong, arms too long, heads cocked at broken angles. One of them looked directly at the camera. At me. The monitor flickered and went black. I didn't breathe until dawn. When the man returned, I demanded answers. My voice cracked, my hands shook, but I didn't care. "What's down there? What the hell is happening?" He tilted his head, eyes shining with something almost like amusement. "They were travelers once," he said. "Like you, passing through, but they couldn't resist. They always open the door eventually. What happens when they do?" I whispered. His smile widened. "You'll see." I told myself I'd never go back, that I'd leave, no matter what it cost me. But the third night, I drove out again. Why? I don't know. Maybe I didn't have a choice anymore. The station looked the same. The man wasn't waiting at the door this time. The air felt heavier, the silence thicker. At 1:15, the trapdoor began to shake. Hard. Dust rose from the floorboards, the padlock straining against its bolts. And the voices, all of them, screamed. Not words, not sentences. Just pure rage, pain, hunger. The kind of sound that makes your stomach flip, That makes your body want to curl in on itself. The padlock snapped. The trapdoor swung open. I don't remember deciding to move, but I found myself standing at the edge, staring down into the dark. The stench hit me so hard I gagged. Rot, mildew, something chemical and sour. Shapes moved in the blackness. Pale hands reaching upward. Fingers long and sharp, nails clawing against the dirt walls. Faces, if you could call them faces, staring up at me with mouths too wide, eyes sunken and wet, and all of them smiling. The voice rose above the rest, smooth and calm, cutting through the chaos. "Come down, Ryan. It's your turn." I should have run. I should have slammed the door shut. But I didn't. I stood frozen, staring into those impossible faces, until something grabbed my ankle. Cold fingers, impossibly strong, yanked me toward the stairs. I screamed, kicking, clawing, dragging myself backward. The grip loosened, and I fell hard against the counter, chest heaving. The basement went silent. The trapdoor slammed shut on its own. The padlock clicked back into place. At dawn, the man returned. His smile was wider than ever. "You looked," he said. Not a question. I didn't answer. "You'll be back," he continued, almost gently. "They always come back." I left. I don't remember the drive. 1 minute I was staring at his perfect teeth. The next I was waking in my own bed, the smell of gasoline still clinging to my clothes. That was a month ago. I told myself I'd never return. But every night since, I've dreamed of that trapdoor, of the pale faces waiting below. And last night, when I woke up, there was dirt on my sheets. Fresh, damp, reeking of rot. This morning, my front door was unlocked, and on the floor, in front of it, sat the padlock from the gas station basement. It was open,